We continue now at the top of Daf Tzayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Moed Kattan. This is Moed Kattan Daf 16a. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked whether a Mitzorah can send a korban to the Beis HaMikdash to be brought on his behalf. And so the Gemara quoted a Brisa. The Brisa quoted a pasuk in Yechezkel. And the way that the Gemara understood on the previous summit, the pasuk in Yechezkel, was it was referring to somebody who was Tamei Meis or a Mitzorah, purifying themselves. And then the last part of the pasuk we're darshaning now, Zu Asiris Ha'efa Shalo. That's a reference to the Asiris Ha'efa that's brought by a regular Kohen. It's the first korban that a regular Kohen brings that initiates the Kohen into the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, Bevo'o Yakriv. It says that when he comes, he brings a korban. And we darshan as follows, Bizman Sharoi Labia, at a time that a person is able to come to the Beis HaMikdash, meaning only when a person is pure and can actually enter the Beis HaMikdash, Roi Lahakrava, only then is he fit to have a korban be brought on his behalf. Bizman She'eno Roi Labia, but if a person is not fit to come to the Beis HaMikdash, Eino Roi Lahakrava, he is not fit to have a korban be brought on his behalf. From Rabbi Shimon, it is pretty clear that the answer to our question is that a Mitzorah cannot send korbanos to be brought on his behalf. It could be as well that is emerging from Rabbi Yehuda also. Rabbi Yehuda also seems to be saying that you have to be pure in order to bring the korban, but it certainly seems to be true from the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rashi over here says, Zu Asiris Ha'efa Shalosh, maybe Kohen Hediot. It's talking about the Asiris Ha'efa, it's a korban mincha that a regular Kohen brings, K'shemechanchen Oso Lavo Tchila, the first time he brings a korban when he's serving the Beis HaMikdash, K'dichsiv Zeh korban Aaron Avanav Asher Yekriv L'Hashem, B'yom Hi Moshach, so it's on the day that the Kohen is anointed, brings Asiris Ha'efa, brings the Asiris Ha'efa, V'aminu Banav L'Rabos Asiris Ha'efa, Shal Kohen Hediot L'Chinuch. This applies by any regular Kohen, brings this as the first korban to initiate himself into the Avodah. V'lava Kroi de El Koi, the way Rashi understands is that last part of the pasuk isn't talking about the same thing that the first part of the pasuk is talking about. Ela mitzvahs kohanim b'yalmahu to kamer Yechezkel. Yechezkel just turns to the general mitzvahs that apply to kohanim. Now Rashi over here says, Alma shelo haya yachol lahakriv karbono asiris ha'efa. Rashi learns that you see even from Rabbi Yehuda, as I mentioned, that the person is not able to bring this korban, this asiris ha'efa, ad shenitor mitumas meis, until he becomes pure from being tamei meis, v'hu adin mitzarato, and the same would be true if he was tamei from tzaras. So already you see it from Rabbi Yehuda's words again, that a mitzorah cannot send the korban. And as I mentioned, it also seems to be clear from Rabbi Shimon's words as well, Bevo'o Yakriv, when the person's able to come into the Beis HaMikdash, then he can have a korban brought on his behalf, otherwise he cannot. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Minolan de Mishadrin Shlicha de Beidina. How do we know that we send a shliach of the Bezdin, umizamninan leiladina, and that we use that person to summon a person if he has to be summoned to the court? Rashi over here says, Amar Rava, I did the Iri b'menuda mefarishlu. Since we were talking about someone who's ostracized, that's why we're bringing all these halachas of summoning someone to Bezdin, because that involves, if the person refuses, that involves the nidui, it involves ostracizing the person. Umazminan leiladina, Rashi says, labaldin. How do we know this idea that you should send a shliach Bezdin to summon someone to the court? And the Gemara says Dichsiv, because the pasuk says Vayishlach Moshe likro ledasan v'la'aviram b'nei Eliyav. It says that Moshe called Dasan and Aviram. It says Vayishlach. Sounds like he sent a shliach to call Dasan and Aviram to stand before, in this case, to stand before Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, to stand before Hashem in judgment. Again, this is talking about the rebellion by Korach. And so the Gemara says Uminolan demizamninan ledina. And how do we know that how do we know that you're summoning them to court? How do you know that's what was happening over there? Because the pasuk says, Vayomer Moshe el Korach, Atah v'chol adoscha. That's what Moshe says to Korach. He says that you and all of your congregation, you're all going to come before us for judgment. Lakame Gavra Rabbah. Now, how do you know that you summon the person to go in front of a Gavra Rabbah, a great man? Referring again either to the head of the court, or in this case, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dichsiv, like the pasuk says, Lifnei Hashem. It says you're going to come before Hashem. At Upalanya. Now, how do we also know that you're summoning both people who are involved in the court case? You have to summon the person who is prosecuting, so to speak, and also the defense. And the answer to that is Dichsiv, because again, by Korach it says, pasuk says, Atah vohem v'Aaron. It says you come, and also Aaron's going to come. Again, the dispute over there in Parshas Korach was who should really be the Kohen. Should it be Aaron? Should it be Korach? So both litigants have to come before the court. To Kavinan Zimna. Now, how do we know that we set a time and we say you must come at this particular time? Dichsiv, because the pasuk over there says Mochar. It says, come tomorrow, come the next day. The Gemara continues, Zimna basar, Zimna, a time after a time. And Rashi over here explains, Zimna basar, Zimna, di lo asiya hu Zimna. How do we know that if we summon a person to come at one time and he doesn't come at that particular time, kavinon le zimna achrisi, that we now set another time, a subsequent time, and tell the person to come at that time. D'chsiv, because the pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Yirmiyah, karu sham paro melech Mitzrayim sha'on havir hamoed. It means that Paro was called and the time had passed. And Rashi over here explains, karu sham shamta means to say, we're darshaning the word sham as shamta, meaning he's ostracized. Kilomar shamta leparo. The pasuk is saying there should be an ostracization for Paro, shehevir hamoed, because the time passed. Kilomar shehevir oso moed, shesamo achar moed rishon, meaning there was a first time and now a second time, and Paro, when he was summoned, so to speak, he did not come, so there should be a shamta, there should be an ostracization. And the Gemara continues, Umenolan, and from where do we know, di mispaker b'shlicha de beidino, that let's say the person, when he's summoned by the shliach bezdin, let's say he acts in a fashion that is inappropriate towards the shliach bezdin, v'asi v'amar, and now the shliach bezdin comes and reports what happened, lo mischazi kalish nabisha, that's not going to be considered like lashon hara. The shliach bezdin is allowed to tell the bezdin, they mistreated me, this individual mistreated me when I summoned him to the court. Techsiv, because the pasuk says, ha'ineihu anashim ha'im tenaker, that was the response of Dasan and Aviram. They said, even if you put out our eyes, we're not going to come. And that was reported apparently to Moshe Rabbeinu by the Shliach Bezin. You see that the Shliach Bezin is allowed to report what is said, and it's not considered to be like lashon hara. And the Gemara continues, and how do we know that we ostracize the individual? Like the pasuk says, Oru Meiroz. There's a pasuk in Sefer Shoftim. Meiroz didn't join the battle. It's talking about together with Barak. He did not join the battle, and therefore he's cursed. He's effectively ostracized. And the Gemara says, "Dehachi svara de gavra rabba." How do we know that when we ostracize a person, we say this was the opinion of a great individual? You're being ostracized by a great leader of the community. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, "Amar Malach Hashem." When Barak ostracizes Meiroz, so he says the Malach of Hashem is the one who said this. He said it as a shliach of the Malach of Hashem. And how do we know that we go even further than just ostracizing? We even go ahead and we excommunicate. Rashi says we even curse the individual. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, Oru, and it means to say Orur, that the individual is cursed. And how do we know that we even ostracize those who eat and drink together with the individual, and even those who are within the arba amos of the individual? Because it says all of its inhabitants, all of the inhabitants as well with Meiroz, they together with him, they're also ostracized. Now, how do we know that we specify the person's sin publicly? We say publicly what the person did. Like the pasuk over there says in Shoftim, Kilo Bola Ezras Hashem. It says exactly what he did wrong. They didn't come to help out in the war efforts. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Ula, and Ula says, B'dalid mea shipure shamte barak l'meiroz. That when Barak ostracized Meiroz, he did it with 400 shofaros. The point is, they did it in a very public fashion. And the Gemara continues, Ika diamri gavra rabahava. Some people say that Meiroz was just a great individual. They wanted him to join the war efforts, and he didn't join. V'ika diamri, but some say kochavahava. It was actually a star. Rashi says kochavahave mazole de Sisra. It was the mazel, the astrology of Sisra, and that was the star that was supposed to join the war effort, so to speak. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, min shamayim nilchamu hakochavim. It says that the stars, they fought from the heavens. And the Gemara continues, now how do we know that somebody who doesn't listen to the Rabbanan will even take away his property, will make his property hefker? Like the pasuk says, anyone who doesn't come according to the advice of the generals in 3 days, Vazakanim and the elders, all of his property is going to be taken. He's going to be separated from the congregation. And the Gemara continues, Umenolon denotzinon velaitinon umachinon v'talshinon seyor umashbi'inon. How do we know that we contend against such a person, we curse such a person, we strike such a person, we pull out his hair, we force him to take an oath, we do all of these things to people who don't listen to the Bezdin? Like the pasuk says, v'orivimon v'akalaleim v'akamehem anoshim v'emrote v'ashbim. It says all of these languages. We fight with the person, curse the person, hit the person, pull out their hair, force them to take an oath. And the Gemara continues, umanolan dekafsinon v'yasrinon. How do we know that we shackle the person, we bind the person up? V'yavdinon hardafa, we do hardafa. The Gemara will explain what that is. It's a kind of pressure. How do we know we do all of these things to somebody who's not listening to the court? Like the pasuk says, hein lamos, hein l'shroshi. It talks about the fact that it's going to be for death, for banishment. Hein la'anish nichsin, taking away property. V'la'asurin, and binding the person up. So that pasuk supports that idea as well. The Gemara says, Maila sharoshi. What does it mean, sharoshi? Amar Adamari, Amar Nechemia bar Baruch, Amar Rav Chia bar Avin, Amar Rav Yehuda. Adamari says the name of Nechemia bar Baruch, in the name of Rav Chia bar Avin, in the name of Rav Yehuda. Hardafa, that is exactly what we said before. It means hardafa. And the Gemara says, my hardafa, what is hardafa? Amar Rav Yehuda Breder Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei de Rav. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas, said the name of Rav, Minadin la'alter. What it means is as follows. You ostracize the person immediately. V'shon in la'achar lamed. Then after 30 days, you do it again. You repeat the nidui. U'machrim in la'achar shishim. And you take it a level higher. You even do a cherem. You even excommunicate the person after 60 days. Amar le Rav Huna Bar Chinana. Rav Huna Bar Chinana said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Chisa. This is what Rav Chisa says. It means Master and Bay, we warn the individual. Sheni, v'chamishi, v'sheni. First, we give the person a warning Monday, a Thursday, and a Monday, meaning we warn them on a Monday, a Thursday, and a Monday, and then we begin this process of ostracizing. And the Gemara says, Hani mili limamona, that's all true when it comes to monetary issues. Aval afkirusa, but let's say you have a person, afkirusa means to say that they're mevazet talmidei chachamim, they embarrass talmidei chachamim, so then la'alter, then actually we're going to ostracize the person immediately. And the Gemara continues, there was once a particular butcher who acted in a way of bizayon, who disgraced Rav Tuvi bar Masna. So imnu aleh Abaye v'Rava. So Abaye and Rava, they took a vote against this person, v'shamtu, and they ostracized the individual. L'sof, then at the end, azal paisi l'baldine, he went and he made up with the person that he was arguing with. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye said, Hechi li'avin, what should we do over here? Literally, if we're going to permit the person, we're going to take away the nidui. So lochal shamta aleh tolasin yom. It hasn't even been 30 days for it to really be counted as a nidui. It's got to be at least 30 days. We can't undo it this early. But lo literally, if we don't undo it, kabo rabbanon l'meil. But the rabbanon want to use this individual. In other words, this person used to sell. He was a butcher. He used to sell to the rabbanon. The rabbanon wanted to purchase from the individual. So really, it was to the benefit of the rabbanon that they would undo the nidui. And so the Gemara says, Amar lei l'Ravidi Baravin. He said to Ravidi Baravin, Midi shmi alach b'ha. Have you heard anything in such a situation? What should we do? So the Gemara says, Amar lei said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Tachlifa Baravima Amar Shmuel. So says Rav Tachlifa Baravima in the name of Shmuel, Tut asar v'tut shari. The shofar that made it prohibited is the same shofar that can make it permitted. Tut is like the sound that comes out of the shofar. Rashi says, Tut asar, tut shari. Kilomar matzi lemishri, you could permit him. Afagav de lo cholalel lam yom, even though it has not been 30 days, still we're allowed to permit him. The oso shofar shenidu yachol hatilo, the same shofar that put the person, that ostracized the person, can also matir or mishrile besoch lam yom. It can even be done. You can even permit within the 30 days. In other words, it's not going to be a problem. The Gemara continues. Amar lei, he said back to him, Hani mili levamona. This idea that we can undo it before 30 days is up. Again, that's by a monetary case. Avolafki rusa, but when it comes to a situation of mevazet talmidei chachamim, adechayla shamta oleh tolasan yom, and there you actually do have to wait for the nidui to go for 30 days. And the Gemara continues, Alma kosavar Abaye. We see from this whole discussion that Abaye holds, Hani beit telasa d'shamitu. If you have a bezdin of 3 people that ostracize someone, lo asu telasa acharini v'sharule. You can't have a different 3 people come and try to undo it. As Rashi over here says, lo asu acharini v'sharule midavahader iul nafshi lemishrei. Abaye himself was the one that felt he had to undo the nidui because he's the one that put him in nidui. It sounds like the same bezdin that puts someone in nidui, they have to be the bezdin that undoes it. And the Gemara says di boilu, because this actually was a question to the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon wanted to know if you can have a different bezdin undo a nidui of a previous bezdin. Hani beit telasa d'shamitu. If you have a bezdin of 3 that puts someone in nidui, ma'u lemeisei telasa achrini v'sharulei. Is it possible for a different bezdin of 3 to come and permit the person? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here a proof to that question. It says, Menuda l'Rav, Menuda l'Talmud. It says, let's say you have an individual who was put in nidui to the Rebbe, so the Talmud also, the students also have to treat that person as if he's ostracized. However, Menuda l'Talmud, ain't no Menuda l'Rav. Let's say someone's ostracized from a Talmud, so then that doesn't necessarily mean they're ostracized from the Rebbe. The Rebbe doesn't have to conduct himself as if that person is ostracized. It only applies with regards to the Talmud. Menuda li'iro, menuda li'iracheres. If somebody is menuda to his own city, then he's also in nidui regarding other cities. But menuda li'iracheres, if a person is in nidui to other cities, eino menuda li'iru. That doesn't mean he's in nidui in terms of his own city. Menuda l'nasi, if a person is ostracized from the nasi, the president, menuda l'chol Yisrael, he's then considered ostracized from all of Klal Yisrael. Menuda l'chol Yisrael, but if somebody is considered ostracized from Klal Yisrael, eino menuda l'nasi, he's not necessarily considered ostracized from the nasi. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Echad min hatalmidim shenido v'mes. Let's say one of the Talmidim puts somebody in nidui and then he dies, chelko eino mufer, so his portion is never able to be undone. Again, it seems to be saying that the person himself who put in nidui has to be the person to take the person out of nidui. And the Gemara says, Shma mino tzlo shma mino. You see from this brisa three things. Number one, Talmud shenido lichvodo niduyav nido. Number one, you see that a student, let's say it's just for his own honor, he feels that his own honor was disparaged, so then that nidoy is effective. Rashi over here says, Shenido lichvodo v'lo l'shem shamayim. Let's say you have a Talmud who puts someone in nidoy, it's not l'shem shamayim. It's not because we're ostracizing this guy because he sinned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's ostracizing only because he sinned to the Talmud. Ela shehitra is negdo, he did something that was against the Talmud. So vadai keva datani ein menuda l'rav, it's clear, since it says that if you're menuda l'Talmud, you're not menuda l'rav, this cannot be a case of someone who's menuda l'shamayim. It's got to be personal between the Talmud and this individual, and that's why it doesn't apply to the Rav. Vadai lo nida ela b'shvil kevodo. If it's not menuda l'rav, it's got to be for the Talmud's own covet. The iba mili di surav, if this person did something forbidden, kimisha menuda l'rav, that's as if he's menuda from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the Rav also. Dein chochma vein eitza, nothing goes against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'katani ein menuda l'rav, aval l'kuli alma menuda. It sounds like the nidoy works, just not for the Rav. In other words, if a Talmud goes ahead and ostracizes someone for his own, because of the Talmud's own personal covet, apparently that works. Ushma mino, you also see from this brisa, kol echad ve'echad mefer chelko, that each individual is able to annul his own portion of the nidoy. Ushma mino, and you also see further, hani beitzalos, if you have a bezin of three, the shamitu, that they put someone, they ostracize someone, loasu tulasa acharini v'sharula. You can't have a different three people come along and permit. And Rashi over here says, kol echad mefer chelko, midiktani chelko eno mufer. Again, it talked about the case where the person died, who put the person who ostracized then died, and it said his chelik can never be undone because he died. So you see that each person undoes his own portion of the nidoy. Lo asu achrini v'shari, and it also says no one else can come and undo it. Midiktani chelko eino mufer, because it says again liolam, forever that person's portion is not undone. Afilu sharu leachrini, even if someone else tries to come along and permit it, it's not going to work. The Gemara continues, Amar Amemar says, Hilchasa, the halacha is Hani Beitlasa D'Shamitu. Again, if you have three people who ostracize someone, also Beitlasa Achrini V'Sharule. Actually, the halacha is the opposite, and another three people can come along and they can permit him. Amar Le Ravashi Le Amemar, Ravashi said to Amemar, V'atanya, but didn't we learn in the brisa just above? Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Echad min ha-talmidim shenidav ha-meis, if one of the talmidim ostracizes someone and he dies, chelko eino mufer, his portion is not able to be undone. So you see, on the contrary, no one else can come along. My love eino mufer klal doesn't mean it can never be undone. And the Gemara says that's not what it means. Lo no. You have to wait until a different bezin comes along, a different bezin of three comes along and undoes it, and indeed it is possible to undo it. One bezin can undo another bezin's nidui. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Ein nidui pachos milamed yom. Nidui, by definition, if someone's ostracized, cannot be less than 30 days, as we mentioned above. Ve'ein nezifa pachos mizayin yom. It's not called nezifa. Nezifa also is like a form of ostracizing. That can't be less than 7 days. Nezifa has to be at least 7 days. Even though there's no proof to this idea, but there is a hint to it. Shenemar, the pasuk says, yorok yarak b'faneha halo sicholem shivas yamim. That happened by Miriam, said, if her father would spit in her face, wouldn't she be ashamed for 7 days? That's the idea of Nazifa being 7 days. Amar Rav Chisda says, Nidoi shelanu, our Nidoi, refers to the Nidoi in Bavel, Nazifa shelahan is like the Nazifa of Eretz Yisrael, meaning our Nidoi is just 7 days, like Nazifa of Eretz Yisrael. Nazifa did who? Shiva Vesulo. And the Gemara asks 1 second, is it really true that Nazifa in Eretz Yisrael is just 7 days and no more than that? Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe bar Kapara, there's a story with Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe and bar Kapara. Havayasvi v'kagarsi, they were sitting and learning. Kashalu shmaita, they had a difficulty in a certain sugya. Amar le Rabbi Shimon le bar Kapara, so Rabbi Shimon said to bar Kapara, Dover zet tzarech Rebbe, this thing needs Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon was the son of Rebbe. He says something as difficult as that needs my father, needs Rebbe to answer it up. Amar le bar Kapara le Rabbi Shimon, so bar Kapara said to Rabbi Shimon, Umar Rebbe Omer b'dover zeh, what could Rebbe say about this thing? There's no way that Rebbe is going to know the answer to this question. So Azal Amar Leili Avua. So then Rabbi Shimon went and told his father, Rebbe, what Bar Kapara said about him. So Ikbit, so Rebbe became angry about it. So Asa Bar Kapara lischazuyele. So then Bar Kapara went to visit Rebbe. It says that Rebbe was sick, and Rashi over here says, Levaker es Rebbe sheyechola shekibel olav Yisurin. He accepted upon himself Yisurin, and he was sick, and Bar Kapara went to visit him. So Amar Le Bar Kapara Eini Makircha Meolam. So he said to him, Bar Kapara, I don't recognize you, I don't know you. Rashi says, Ramaz lo she'eno rotze leroso. Rebbe was telling Bar Kapara, I don't want to see you. So in other words, he was upset. He was saying he was upset about what Bar Kapara said. So Yada the nakan milsa bedaite. So therefore Bar Kapara understood that Rebbe was upset at him. Noag Nizifusa Benavshe Tlasin Yomin. The story ends that Bar Kapar conducted himself as if he was in Nizifa for 30 days. So you see over here that it's 30 days, it's not just 7 days. The Gemara continues with another story. There was another time that Rebbe made a decree not to teach the students out in the marketplace. They should only be taught in the base medrash. And my Darish, what did Rebbe darshan? What pasuk? This is a pasuk in Shir Ashirim, Chamuka Yerechayach Kemo Chaloyim. It says your thighs, they're like jewels. The full pasuk is Kemo Chaloyim Ma'aseh Yedei Amun. Talks about the work of an artist. We're going to say it refers to Divrei Torah. We darshan my Yerech B'Seiser, just like a thigh is something that's kept private, that's kept hidden. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tazayin Amud Beis.